Before we step into the darkness, make sure you're locked in. Subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment, because stories like this don't let go once they start. Red and blue lights tore through the quiet suburban street, bouncing off parked cars and sleepy front porches. It was just after dusk when the first patrol unit screeched to a stop in front of a modest single-family home, its front lawn still wet from a late afternoon sprinkler. Neighbors stood frozen in their driveways, phones raised, watching as officers sprinted toward the curb. Lying just steps from the front door was a woman, motionless, her body positioned as if she'd collapsed mid-stride, as though she had almost made it to safety. Inside the house, chaos echoed through the open doorway. A dispatcher's voice crackled from a phone abandoned on the kitchen counter, still connected to 911. Moments earlier, terrified children had been screaming into that line, their words tumbling over one another in panic. "Please hurry," one of them had begged. Another voice, smaller and shaking, cut through the background noise. "I can't live without her." The woman outside was a mother, a wife, and according to the first frantic reports, she had been shot by the man who once promised to protect her. Police secured the scene quickly, tape snapping in the cold air as detectives arrived and began piecing together the fragments of a family's worst night. The victim had been found just feet from where her children had watched helplessly from inside. There were no signs of a break-in, no mystery intruder slipping away into the dark. This was personal, devastatingly so. The suspect was already gone. Witnesses told officers they saw a man matching the husband's description speed away moments after the shots were fired. A truck was missing from the driveway. An alert went out across the county as patrol cars fanned into nearby neighborhoods, scanning side streets and highway ramps. The manhunt had begun, and with it, the unsettling question every investigator was asking: where was he going and what was he thinking? As detectives moved through the home, they found a space that looked like a life interrupted. Shoes by the door, family photos lining the hallway, a school backpack slumped against the couch, homework half finished. But beneath the normalcy were cracks that hinted at something darker. Raised voices reported by neighbors in the past, police calls that never resulted in arrests, and paperwork, quiet, legal, ominous paperwork filed just days earlier. A protective order. According to court records, the victim had recently sought help, alleging threats and escalating behavior. She had been afraid enough to put it in writing, afraid enough to believe that distance might keep her and her children safe. It hadn't. Hours later, officers located the missing truck abandoned near a wooded area miles away. The suspect was taken into custody without resistance. When questioned, his words were chillingly calm, wrapped in a kind of emotional contradiction investigators had heard before. He spoke of love, of regret, of not being able to live without her. But as detectives reviewed the 911 call again, listening to the children's voices replayed in slow, agonizing clarity, they realized something didn't add up. There was a moment on that recording, just a few seconds, where another sound could be heard, a detail no one noticed at first. And once they did, the case took a far darker turn. By morning, the quiet street had become a magnet for grief and suspicion. News vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes angled toward the sky, while neighbors whispered behind drawn curtains. Inside the police department, the case file was already thickening. Photos, timelines, transcripts, each page pushing investigators closer to a truth that felt heavier by the hour. Detectives began where the story fractured, the days leading up to the shooting. The marriage, once described as loving, had reportedly unraveled under mounting pressure. Friends spoke cautiously, choosing their words like stepping around broken glass. Arguments had grown louder, the tension more visible. And then there was the protective order, filed just 3 days before the killing. On paper, it described fear, specific, detailed, unmistakable, threats, intimidation, a sense that something terrible was coming. Investigators interviewed the children in a quiet room away from flashing lights and cameras. They spoke in fragments, their accounts halting but hauntingly consistent. Their mother had been trying to leave. She had told them to stay inside. She had stepped out onto the front lawn to talk, hoping to calm him down, hoping to end the argument without frightening them. That was when the shouting escalated. That was when the sound they would never forget shattered the evening.
Back at headquarters, analysts replayed the 911 call again and again. At first, it was just panic, crying, pleading, overlapping voices. But as audio technicians isolated the background noise, something emerged beneath the chaos. Not just raised voices, not just a single confrontation. There was a pause, a brief silence, and then words spoken low, controlled, almost rehearsed. Detectives exchanged looks. This wasn't rage spiraling out of control. This was something else. Meanwhile, the suspect sat alone in a holding cell, his story already forming. He claimed it was an accident, a misunderstanding. He said he loved his wife, that he had gone there to talk, to fix things. He told investigators he couldn't imagine life without her, repeating the phrase as if saying it enough times might soften what had happened. But when pressed about the protective order, his answers blurred. He minimized it, dismissed it as emotional exaggeration. The physical evidence told a colder story. Forensic reports showed the shots were fired at close range. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication the weapon discharged accidentally. The trajectory suggested intent, not chaos. And then there was the placement of shell casings, details that contradicted the suspect's version of events. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered something even more unsettling. In the days before the shooting, the suspect had been making quiet preparations. Phone records showed calls to relatives he hadn't spoken to in years. Financial activity hinted at sudden withdrawals. A search history revealed late-night questions about custody, consequences, and how quickly restraining orders could be enforced. This wasn't a man acting on impulse. This was a man anticipating an ending he refused to accept. Then came the discovery that changed the entire direction of the case. A neighbor, shaken but determined, came forward with footage from a home security camera across the street. The video was grainy, partially obscured by a tree, but it captured something prosecutors couldn't ignore. It showed the victim stepping away from the house, and it showed the suspect following her, calmly, deliberately. As detectives watched the clip in silence, one realization settled heavily over the room. What happened that night wasn't a tragic accident or a sudden loss of control. It was a decision, and the full cost of that decision was only beginning to surface. The courtroom was silent as the security footage played on a large screen, every juror leaning forward, every breath held. The grainy video froze on the moment that defined the case. The victim turning back toward her home, the place she believed still held safety, and the man behind her closing the distance without hesitation. There was no struggle visible, no frantic movement, just a calm, irreversible approach. Prosecutors called it premeditation. The defense called it a man unraveling, but the evidence refused to bend. Forensic experts testified that the trajectory of the shots and the spacing of the shell casings aligned perfectly with the video timeline. Audio specialists confirmed what detectives had suspected all along. The low, controlled words captured on the 911 call came from the suspect, not the victim. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't pleading. He was issuing commands, even as his children listened from inside the house. When investigators presented the suspect's digital footprint, the final illusion collapsed. The late-night searches, the financial moves, the unanswered messages sent after the protective order was filed. It painted a picture of a man watching control slip through his fingers and deciding that if he couldn't have his family on his terms, no one would. The children did not testify. They didn't have to. Their 911 call echoed through the courtroom, played once and never repeated. Several jurors wiped their eyes. One lowered her head and never looked back up. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. Guilty. There was no outburst, no denial. The suspect stood motionless as the words settled over him, his face unreadable. When given a chance to speak, he repeated the same line he'd offered police on the night of the arrest. He said he loved her. He said he couldn't live without her. The judge sentenced him to decades behind bars, citing not only the crime itself, but the irreversible damage inflicted on the children who would carry that night with them for the rest of their lives. As deputies led him away, the courtroom doors closed with a sound that felt final, heavy, and far too late. Outside, the house was eventually sold. New paint covered the marks left behind. Fresh grass grew where police tape once fluttered. To strangers passing by, it looked like any other home on any other street. But the children never returned. They moved away quietly, carrying only what they could fit into suitcases and memory. Therapy became routine. Silence became familiar. And every so often, when a phone rang unexpectedly, their bodies still tensed, bracing for news they hoped would never come again. Investigators would later admit that the warning signs had been there, clear, documented, urgent. A protective order filed just days before, fear put into words, a system that moved too slowly to stop what was already in motion. The case closed. The file was archived. Another name added to a growing list of domestic violence tragedies that could not be undone. But the 911 call remains, a permanent record of the moment innocence shattered, of children forced to grow up in seconds, of a decision that ended one life and fractured several others beyond repair. And if this story left you unsettled, it should have, because somewhere, right now, another warning is being written down, another fear is being voiced, and another ending hasn't happened yet. If you think this case was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.